For years, Michael Jordan's greatness was undeniable, but his legacy was still unproven. In 1991, with everything on the line, he faced the Showtime Lakers, a team of legends, the dynasty standing in his way. For Jordan, this wasn't just basketball. This was a battle for his destiny. This was the moment he changed basketball forever. For nearly a decade, Magic Johnson and the Showtime Lakers ruled the NBA. 5 championship rings, a style of play that dazzled fans and crushed opponents. They were basketball royalty, and they knew it. That's why when they reached the 1991 finals, they expected to win. After all, Michael Jordan and the Bulls had never been there before. But Michael wasn't just another star. He was a player on a mission, facing not just Magic Johnson, but the weight of every failure that had haunted him for years. The clash between the Bulls and Lakers was more than just a championship series. It was a battle between 2 eras. Magic's dynasty represented the past, while Jordan's rise symbolized the future of basketball. But after a devastating loss in Game 1, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The critics doubted, the pressure mounted, and then Michael Jordan decided to rewrite history. What came next wasn't just dominance, it was the beginning of a revolution. The NBA had already overcome its crisis. The generation of Magic, Bird, and Jordan had multiplied the ratings compared to previous decades. But what no one knew was that this was just the beginning of the explosion. The league was going through an unprecedented process because of the absurd talent of the best player nobody had ever seen. It was already 6 consecutive seasons in which MJ had led the league in scoring. Since that legendary 63-point playoff game against Larry Bird's legendary Celtics, he had averaged 34 points per game in his 409 NBA appearances. He was a relentless scorer. He was a player who was already building his individual legacy, but he was missing something. He was missing being the next to hoist the Larry O'Brien. Despite his enormous success as a scorer, Michael Jordan had yet to win an NBA championship. However, in 1991, it seemed that no one could stop him. After winning his second career MVP and leading the Bulls to a record of 62 wins and 21 losses, his Bulls were ready for the challenge. And they proved it from the start. First, sweeping the New York Knicks of Patrick Ewing, Charles Oakley, and John Starks in the first round, then beating the Philadelphia 76ers of Charles Barkley and Hersey Hawkins in 5 games in the second round, and then sweeping the Detroit Pistons of Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, and Joe Dumars in the Eastern Conference Finals, avoiding their potential three-peat. Chicago had entered the finals with a playoff record of 12 wins and 1 loss, but the Lakers looked too powerful for them. Magic Johnson had won 5 NBA rings during the 1980s. He knew that nothing he was going to face would surprise him. He had seen every player profile, every type of star, and every type of defensive system in his long career. Although Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was no longer around to lead the team along with him, the Lakers had found players capable of replacing his production. James Worthy, Sam Perkins, Byron Scott, Vlade Divac, they all contributed to this Showtime identity that was in its final years of heyday. And, as a core, they had proven to be very good. Good enough to win the Western Conference, losing only 3 playoff games in the process. Before the eyes of the largest NBA audience since the 1987 finals, the Lakers and Bulls were preparing for their epic clash. For a clash that would leave no one indifferent. For a battle that would be written about for decades to come. For many people, this was the moment of truth. If Michael Jordan failed again, his legacy could never be repaired. The enormous slab of all the playoff failures was getting heavier and harder to carry. Maybe this was his last chance. But there was no time when Michael looked closer to the abyss than after Game 1. Even though he was knocking down his shots, even though he was driving to the hoop with unbridled determination over and over again, and even though he was fighting for every loose ball on the court, the Bulls were not able to win Game 1. Michael not only stood out with a performance of 36 points, 12 assists, 8 rebounds, and 3 steals with incredible efficiency, but he also left a lot of memorable moments for the fans. You could make a highlight reel that captures the essence of Michael Jordan, only with the moments of that Game 1. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough. MJ had done everything in his power, and his efforts ended up being in vain, because Sam Perkins scored a 3-pointer that gave the victory to the purple and gold. With a 1-0 on the scoreboard, there was no more margin for error. The Bulls needed to react. Michael Jordan had to take on even more responsibility to make sure it didn't happen again. Deep down, he knew he was capable, but it wasn't easy to do against a much more experienced team. When the Lakers have the lead, you have to take drastic measures, or you end up drowning in the depths of their showtime. The Bulls needed to switch his energy, and Michael took this expression to heart. Everyone remembers that game too, for the same reason. In the most pressured moment of his entire career, Michael decided to do the impossible. As much criticism as he could possibly receive, he just decided to do what no one expected. With his incredible switch hand layup in Game 2 against the Lakers, he didn't just change his mentality. He not only changed his confidence, he also transformed his entire teams. The Bulls totally destroyed the Lakers in that game. In front of their fans, they showed that they were up for the challenge, and that they didn't care how much experience the Lakers had. Magic Johnson's 5 rings and enormous legacy were eclipsed that night by another 33-point, 7-rebound, 13-assist performance. Jordan not only scored 15 of the 18 shots he took from the field that night, he was also the orchestrator of a team's offense in need. During the first 2 games, Michael had decided to disguise himself as Magic Johnson to become the best playmaker in the world. But even though the Bulls beat the Lakers by no less than 21 points, there was still a lot of work to be done. They knew they had to win at least 1 game on the road to become the eventual champions. And everyone knew that the visit to Inglewood to play at that Great Western Forum didn't usually have a happy ending. From the start of the game, the Bulls began to show their ambition. The Lakers' defense was especially active around Michael that night, because they knew that if they could mitigate his effect, the whole team around him would eventually succumb. But nothing seemed to be enough, because Jordan was no longer that scorer that you could restrict. He was no longer a spectacular walking bucket capable of changing games with his streaks. He had completed his transformation to an elite playmaker. What happened in the first 2 games continued to happen during the third. Michael kept reminding the Lakers that he could score, just like any other night, and that he was the go-to guy with seconds left on the clock. But his play reading and court vision were so advanced that they were now afraid to send a second man in for defensive help. Still, it was the Lakers who had the upper hand on the scoreboard that night. Or so it was, until that last play. With less than 10 seconds on the clock, Jordan pulled a new trick out of the hat. From his home, the mid-range, and in front of the huge Vlade Divac, Michael managed to sink a game-tying shot. A shot that if it hadn't gone in, would have put them up against the ropes. But that nevertheless served to force an overtime that the Bulls could not lose. MJ came to his team's rescue once again, and Chicago dominated the overtime by a hefty score of 12 points to 4. Now, they just had to finish the job by winning their home games. Michael, however, wanted to win the ring much sooner. He wanted to prove that Chicago was not only superior to Los Angeles, but that they were capable of dominating them in their own court. You don't have to look far to prove it, because in one of the first plays of Game 4, Michael proved again that nobody could stop him. That dunk was a statement in the city of Los Angeles, a moment that redefined the concept of Showtime. Michael had gone from being the victim to being the executioner. And now he didn't just want to win. He wanted to bring about the end of the Showtime dynasty. Michael could do nothing to stop him, but it wasn't his fault. There wasn't a single defender in the league capable of containing him at this point. His shots were determined to go in regardless of the context and time left on the clock. And of course, as in the entire series, he demonstrated his playmaking ability. Jordan once again swept the Lakers with another historic performance of 28 points, 5 rebounds, and 13 assists, and the Bulls ended up winning by 15 points. Michael only had to win the next game at the Forum to complete his mission, to finally get what he had been fighting for almost 8 seasons. Although it always tastes better to win the ultimate game in front of your fans, winning 3 games in a row at the Lakers' Mecca was an offer hard to refuse. But from the beginning, MJ showed that he was going to continue to dominate just the same. Whether it was with spectacular passes to his teammates or with his uncontested transition play, he was all fury. He was all about ambition. 2 aspects you have to perform at the highest level on the biggest stage. Every play was a more crowded blow to a team that saw it impossible to win a home game. The desperation was visible on the faces of all the players. But the most desperate thing was the fact that MJ always had an answer, a counter, a new resource to show off in front of a hostile crowd. To contain the best player in the world in this state of mind was simply impossible. And that's why Jordan ended up winning. That's why he beat the Lakers to become the 1991 NBA champion. Euphoric, excited, satisfied. He hadn't experienced these feelings since he became the Division I champion with North Carolina. Years of frustration and broken dreams had been eclipsed by a playoff run that would go down in the history books. With averages of 31.2 points, 6.6 rebounds, and 11.4 assists, Jordan dominated one of the most iconic finals in league history. Not even Magic Johnson could escape the allure of MJ's historic playoff run, because deep down, he knew what Michael Jordan meant to basketball. Playing in the finals against him gave him the opportunity to see firsthand how number 23 was able to dominate games in the moments of truth. And just 2 years later, in 1993, he made it clear on television.
Let me just say this. No question that Michael would have scored 50 on us or 50 on anybody else because he's just a great basketball player. But I think we would have held everybody else down and not take anything away from the Bulls, because I'm going to be very upset if he's three-peats, that being Michael Jordan, because he's going to have something over me. See, I can tease him about my 5 championships. Now he's going to be able to, if he does it, be able to tease me about three-peating, and something I couldn't do.
Praising Jordan in a way that only one of the greatest players in the league history can afford. But the reality is that this wasn't just a finals. It wasn't just a championship. The 1991 finals represented the clash of 2 dynasties, and in essence, they represented the clash of 2 eras. The Showtime era of the Lakers had been extremely dominant during the 1980s. Only Larry Bird was able to take 3 rings away from them with a spectacular all-around game. But the Bulls were coming on strong. They knew that their core had the potential to define the next era of basketball, to dictate the future of a sport that was about to explode worldwide. And in order to exercise this dictatorship in which there can only be one king, Michael Jordan became the chosen one. This was only the beginning of his legend. His legacy multiplied exponentially with each of the 6 rings he won with the Chicago Bulls. 2 unrepeatable three-peats that elevated him to the Olympus, not only of the NBA, but of the sport in general. In the explosive clash between the old and the new school, Michael proved that it was his turn, probably this time, forever. For many, this was the hardest ring Michael could win. Not only did he beat some of the most dominant teams of the decade, but he made it look easy. Or did he? What do you think was the championship that truly made Michael Jordan the greatest player of all time? Share your thoughts below. Let's settle the debate. And if you love reliving the magic of his airness, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It's your way of staying connected to basketball's greatest stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.